Hello
Say
everyone.
them not to walk also.
Okay, so as you know what the theme is about, the unwritten chapter. So if you see here, this is me when I was in 6th standard, and I still don't remember what I was thinking back then when this picture was taken. But one thing was for sure that I loved aircrafts a lot. And this picture reminds me of those days when I used to attend almost every air show which used to happen, primarily because my dad was also from the military. So all my life I have moved from one city to another, changing schools, making new friends. But one thing had remained constant, that is to always look up in the sky and identify aircrafts and helicopter by mere sight and sound of it. And probably that's the reason why my name is also Akash. And probably yes. So that's how the dream started, to be a fighter pilot in the Indian Air Force. And one fine day when I was in 12th standard, I was in Yalanka, which hosts one of the biggest air show called Aero India in the Asia. And my dad came back from office and he brought a book. And that book was called NDA Preparation. For those of you, NDA is National Defense Academy, the academy where if you are after 12th, you can join that to become an officer in the Indian Armed Forces, be it Army, Air Force, Navy. So he gave that book to me and he said, you should try this. You'll be a good officer. And from that day, I prepared well, and when I was in 12th, I cleared NDA 3 times, one after the other. And I still remember when I went to AFSB Mysore for the first time, there they test everything, meaning they'll test you how you think, how you lead your people in the group, and how you respond to situations. Back then, there was a test called PABT, which is called Pilot Aptitude Battery Test, which is once in a lifetime opportunity. If you pass it, you can become a pilot in the military. If you fail it, you can never become one in the military at least. And they were doing trials for another test called CPSS, which is called Computerized Selection System, where they allow you to sit inside a cockpit and play those 10 games which test your multitasking and decision making in a short span of time. And that moment when I was sitting in the cockpit playing those games, and I could see one of the best fighter pilots right in front of us benchmarking their own scores, I thought probably this is where I belonged and I will make it. But unfortunately, I was not recommended in that attempt. And from there on, I kept doing the same thing. Since I had already cleared NDA 3 times, I went all the 3 times to AFSB Mysore. But on the 5th day, somehow, my chest number was never called. So if you see here, I'm right there. And this is one of those attempts where I had gone to Bangalore, I guess. But that was from AFSB Mysore. And you see a lot of bunch of people after 12th standard who wanted to join the forces were right there. Some of them were recommended. And also, this is one of the batch where the highest number of people were recommended to join the forces as well in the ND attempt. So now, while all this was happening, I kept trying. For almost a decade, I had given multiple attempts until I got so close, but I saw the same and the only dream breaking right in front of me. And that is when I realized these dreams that we have, right, these are not a destination. These are a type of energy. When the doors of the cockpit closed, then the energy had to go somewhere. So I thought about it. So while I was still giving the SSBs, so what I had started doing was, this was back in 2015, I had started my own channel called Military Mantra with a single aim that I wanted to help and guide aspirants who at that point in time did not have much exposure to what SSB was, how to clear all those written exams, and what life inside the armed forces looks like. Basically, I was trying to be that guide which I hoped I had myself. So with that idea, I started the channel called Military Mantra, which later on evolved into a platform where I started to interview a lot of veterans from the armed forces. Also, probably the only one who has interviewed all the special forces operators which exist in India and also outside of India on my channel. And while I did that, I also ensured that I could give back to the community where I belong to from the military. I keep visiting the families of our brave hearts who made the supreme sacrifice for our nation across the country. And I'll be telling you some stories which probably would never get to hear from anybody, probably sometimes later. in this talk. And that was one way of me transferring that energy, that obsession, and that josh that I had to serve the same country. Now, in the later part of my life, life did give me a uniform, and which you could probably see here as well. So I became a traffic warden with Bengaluru City Police. While all of us talk about the traffic in Bengaluru, very few people choose to solve a problem rather than just telling, okay, traffic is too much, we cannot handle that, you will be definitely late. You will always point to, okay, traffic was there, that's why I did not reach office on time. But there are few people who chose to be a part of solution. And not just me, there are people like me who have joined as a traffic warden with City Police. So what do we do? So we stand on those roads where the chaos hits, where people are still honking, not listening to you, they want to cross the road, they want to jump the signal, but there will be few people who will help you out. And we are unlike the traffic police, we are somebody from the civilian world themselves. So we empathize better with the people and we help them out whenever required on the road. So that is one thing that I did as part of the transfer of the energy that is required. And this is what I want to tell you. When your path A fails, my path A was to join the defense forces and serve the nation. But your why doesn't have to fail. Why did I want to join? The discipline, the uniform, and the camaraderie that was there. I didn't want that to fail. That is why I did everything to transfer that energy into something which would make or give me the same happiness of the same thing if I would have joined the forces. So now I do have a uniform, I do give service, but not in the same way how I had imagined, but no less than that. So this is what I want to tell you. That sky is always there when you look up. You just have to find new ways of reaching there. So this is one of those pictures in the uniform. Now, while I was describing you about my failures through the SSB, I had given almost 17 SSBs, and it is across multiple years that I had given those attempts. I was still studying in the engineering college. I'm from UEC, so I was in third semester. I had exhausted all my attempts after the 12th standard. I had given 7 SSBs back then. So this is what my schedule used to look like. Every semester for 5 days, I would go to one of the SSB centers, either Allahabad, Bhopal, or Mysore. So I would go 3 times in a semester and then come back. And by the time I come back, the teacher would be teaching a different chapter altogether. Most of my classmates would be much ahead of me. And even in terms of marks, right, my first 3 semesters score was probably 60, 62, and 65 out of 100. And for a person like me who was a 10 CGPA in 10th, 95 in 12th, it's like a slap on your face. But that is how life would treat you. I was not just facing failures, it was a time where there were multiple conflicts, both internal and external. In the internal world, I kept thinking, I was questioning everything. Was all my past achievements just luck? Or will my future will only be limited to the failures which I have already got and the future failures? The second, during my college days, I did have some financial trouble at home, because of which I did a lot of odd jobs to earn money to support my education itself in various fields. So I had distributed pamphlets outside of the cafes. If you know about Rapido, when it was started, I used to do marketing for them in HSR and BTM. I walked through those roads. Not just that, I took every opportunity that came towards me. If you see some of these images, that one was for a showroom. This is for internet connection. That is outside Cafe Coffee Day. This is what I did for a PNG. They used to go to every college to promote their products. So I used to help them out, find those colleges where we can promote that. I did a very similar event in my own college in UBC. That was for Grofers, now it's called Blinkit. So when they were all beginning their journey, right, that is where I was doing some of the marketing work for them. And during this phase, I learned something which probably no classroom would have taught me. That is, how do I speak to people whom I do not know? How do I accept no from somebody and still move on and try again? These are some of the things which you will never learn in any classroom. But with all these things, my college was still supportive. Attendance was not compulsory, so you could do anything. You can choose not to be in the class also. And there were exams where you could just give blank sheet and you would get full marks also. So now it doesn't happen, but I was lucky back then. So I could do anything that I wanted to. So those opportunities came to me at the right time. But what I want to tell from all these stories that I've told you is this, that life will always be tough. Problems will keep coming. There'll be a point in time where you think that you cannot go ahead anymore. But there's only one way you can proceed ahead, that is through your mental strength. I would like to recite or probably tell you a story. I speak to a lot of special forces operators who operates beyond the enemy line as well. And what they have told me is, during their probation, they have something called as Hell's Week. Even the Navy SEALs have the Hell's Week. We also have it in the Marine Commandos who are from the Indian Navy, and also the Para-SF. So what happens in the Hell's Week is they don't allow you to sleep. You're physically broken down. You do not have any energy left. The only way to go ahead from that point is through your mental strength. So I was speaking to a couple of commandos from the army, and they mentioned to me, whenever times are tough, that is when you become more stronger than the situation itself. In their own language, they call it Mushkil Waqt, Commando Sakt. And when I tell this, I want to narrate just two such incidences, which probably you would never get to hear. I had spoken to a para commander from 21 Para-SF, which operates mostly in Northeast region. This man, a paratrooper, he was injured in an accident while traveling from one place to another in a truck. He was on top of the truck with his rifle, and the truck went down the hill. He lost most of his friends in the same accident, but he lost all the strength below his neck. But he still survives. He has a wife, he has kids. That is the strength of a commando. When situations are tough, they do not give up. I have another story, again from a 21 Para-SF, where they were doing something similar to what we have seen in surgical strikes. We do it on a very frequent basis. It was only got highlighted later point in 2016, but we do it in Northeast quite often. So he was part of one such surgical strike, where one of his leg was shot. He lost his leg. There were multiple gun wounds on his stomach. And you know what? When he was taken back to hospital, he didn't tell his family what has happened. He said, I was playing football and I'm injured. I'll come back in few days. Until he recovered, and then they called the family and then saw that the leg is no more there and he has multiple gunshots. So that is the commitment and that is the strength that they have, no matter how tough the situation was. And these are not just two stories. If I have to tell you, I have multiple stories which are replica of the same thing. I have met somebody who was a major general. He was also a paratrooper in Kashmir. He was shot down by the militant in the stomach from a very close range. All his intestine had come out, and then his buddy had to help him out, put it back, and then he went into surgery. But he lost, his spinal cord was broken, so he was forever on the wheelchair. But he went on to work with the DRDO later on, did a lot of work there. There are men in the uniform who will always be an inspiration about, no matter how tough the times are, you can always be tougher than the times. So these are something that I keep sharing. While these men in uniform are inspiration, what they have always told me is, all of us are equally a commando in our own life. All of us face a different kind of situation, different kind of problems. And commando is not about wearing a uniform or a badge. It's about a mindset that you have to develop. That no matter how bad the situation is, you can always come out of it if you have enough strength. And while I was speaking about people, right, I also meet people, families of these bravehearts whom we have lost in battles, in wars. I'll tell you one such incident. 2 months back, I met Captain M.V. Pranjal. He was the Shauri Chakra awardee. And we were at his home. His dad was there. And somebody came to his home. Probably they wanted some kind of donation for an event that was happening nearby. And they came in and they saw Captain Pranjal's photo inside the home. And they asked his dad, "Sir, is he your elder son?" And he said, "He was my only son, whom he had lost 2 years ago in an operation which happened in Jammu Kashmir." That is the pain that he had to live with. He was his only son whom he lost for the nation. And he and many like him, who are the parents of such brave hearts, continue to live, continue to serve the nation. And that requires a lot of strength, mental strength, a lot of pain along with pride. So if you think you are going through a tough time, you probably haven't spoken to enough people in this world who are facing much difficult situation. So this is how I see it. Whenever I see a very difficult situation, I imagine all those people I have met who have seen the worst and still living very, very happily. So this is what I wanted to tell you, that no matter how difficult situation becomes, you have to use your mental strength. Now, by the end of the college, I told you, right, first 3 semesters was hardly 60-65, but I came back on track. And then I was already scoring 80 to 85 percentage. And by end of the college, I already had 4 offers and one of the highest offer within my branch. And on paper, it was looking perfect, right? You have an offer now, you have everything that you wanted. But then I have worked in a startup right after that. I have worked in MNCs, I have worked in traditional companies. But life was never settled. There were times when, you would stop getting salaries because the startup couldn't afford it. And then there were times where I was spending 4 hours just on the commute, just to reach the office and come back. I was so tired one day that I sat on the bus, reached the last stop, and then I had to come back to office again. You will be only having time to sleep and then go back to office next day. Somehow I felt probably this is not what I needed, and then I resigned the same day while I was sitting in the bus. And that was my last day in the company. And for 1.5 months, I was completely unemployed. I was trying everywhere. I was still giving SSBs, but things were not working out. There were times when I have got promoted. There are times when I've got the salary which I needed. But what I've realized with all of these experiences is that in our mind, we keep thinking, once I get that promotion, that company, that salary, all my problems would be solved. But that is not how it works. Once you solve one problem, the second problem comes, and then the third, and that is how life is. Nobody has promised that life is going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. Challenges will come, difficulties will come. Sometimes you would have to do a work which you probably do not love, but as you keep working, you will find something which you really, really love, and not all of us start at the same point. Some of us can start working on something which we love, and some people have to do some hard work on things which they do not love, eventually reaching what they really, really love. So I want to tell you a story of how I found something which I really loved and why I do it. So while I was still a fresher, I had joined a startup and I was 6 months into it. We and my friends who were from the same college joined the same company. We thought, okay, probably we should do something, because just getting a salary on 30th was not giving us that happiness. So we went to an orphanage in Bengaluru. It was called Angels Orphanage, and we decided, okay, we will make food for them, and we'll donate that food. We'll celebrate something with them. That was the first time all 3 of us went there, and we realized that day we were not thinking anything about what is success, what is failure. We were just there. We were enjoying with those kids. And from that day onwards, every month we would visit almost every orphanage that is possible in Bengaluru, do some activity, donate food, and that is how we kept doing. Even at the point where I was jobless, I still did the same activity. This was back in 2019. Hardly did I know that many years later, I would also be part of the CSR work which one of the organization does, where if you see here, there are some of the schools. These schools are in Karnataka. These are government schools, where with our organization we support a lot of these schools in terms of the school building, if they need anything in terms of in the infrastructure. We have also done it in Tumkur, in Madhugiri, in Kolar, within Bangalore, where we ensure that if we can help somebody, we would do it through the CSR, and I was part of most of those activities even in my current organization. Looks good on the picture, but I would have to tell you why I really do it. Because at the end, end of the day, right, you have to see how do you optimize for your own happiness. What gives you that happiness which you can also share with people? Because when I do it alone, I am happy. But when I do it with 100 people, that happiness just multiplies. And that is how bliss works. That's why you have to, in order to remain in that state of bliss, you'll have to share that happiness with all of them who are with you. So this is one of the reasons. Another reason is my physics teacher, once he was teaching a chapter on photons, and he said it is made up of energy, and energy can never be destroyed. It can only transform from one form to another. And immediately he said, that is what I think about blessings. Blessings that you get when you help somebody. These blessings are also packets of energy, just like photons. It gets collected in your account. And when you really, really, really need it, it will all boil down and come to you. And that is when you see magic, miracles happening in your own life. You yourself can think about it and if it really works or not. But this is what my physics teacher told me back then. So this is what I wanted to tell you about finding and optimizing for happiness, because you will always have problems, but you always have to find one way to really do what you love, because that is where you will get the maximum happiness. And in conclusion, I want to tell you something very important, that all these stories which I can tell you today is because I can connect all those dots right now in the past. But while I was going through all these situations, I really had no idea which direction I was going, whether I was in the right direction or not. But that is how life looks like. You all have plan A, that I want to do this, I want to become this. I also had one. Like becoming a fighter pilot was my plan A. It did not work. So I made a plan B, that I'll work in the corporate, get the job I want, join the company which I need. That also didn't work. I continue to do that. But I always forgot that between plan A and plan A is when life happens. And that is what we really, really have to enjoy. And I want to just tell you one anecdote from a Marine commando whom I had spoken to. He said, when we go to an operation, right, we always make the plan A and B. And plan A will always fail when we go into that operation. And plan B will also fail. It is the plan C that we make at that point in time, thinking about what the situation is, what our own skill sets is, and how much of resources we have. That is what really, really works. So this is what my advice to you is. You can plan as much as you want. Sometimes you will get what you really need, and sometimes you will not get what you need. And that's absolutely fine. That is how life works. And no good story has ever come out when everything went well. Why would you watch a movie where the hero does not have problem? Every day he goes to office, comes back, sleeps, and then again goes to office. Who would watch that movie anyways, right? Then why would you live a life like that, right? So whenever you see a problem, be happy. At least your life is interesting. That one day probably you will be telling a story, because a lot of people would like to hear, because it is at least interesting. And the final thing which I wanted to tell you was, if you are in a phase where you wanted to achieve something and you're not able to do it for some reason, and you do not understand who you are, why are you failing, why not getting what you really, really want, probably it's not the end of the story. It is the beginning of an unwritten chapter which is yet to come. Thank you.